This is the Christian Circle podcast, and you're listening to Pamela Fernandez, where we have conversations about Christian living. Here's the show. So welcome to a new episode of the Christian Circle podcast. Today we have a new guest, and that is Sister Emily Beata Marsh. And she's going to talk to us about the Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque. And the reason why we're talking about her this month is because of the Feast of the Sacred Heart. So, Sister Emily, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry?
So, my name is Sister Emily Beata. I am a member of the Daughters of St. Paul, a religious congregation. And our mission is to proclaim the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, through the media. So that includes, we were founded about 100 years ago. Actually, we just celebrated our 106th birthday a couple days ago. And at the time, the media included mostly print materials, so books and newspapers and magazines. But as things developed and came along, things like radio or video and movies, cinema, and then now so many means with the internet, digital and social media, and our sisters are involved in all of these things to help people know Jesus better, whether that's Catholics who already maybe are already baptized, already go to church, and we want to help them deepen their faith, or people who don't really know God at all. And we encounter people in our book and media centers and in our online ministry who are really questioning and just want to know, okay, what is this all about? And we hope that our presence in the media will help people to know God, know who God is, know his love for them. So that's what we do. I personally, I work in our vocation office. So that means I help young women who are discerning a call to be a sister, who want to know more about religious life, about sisters in general, and also about our community, the Daughters of St. Paul.
You actually wrote a book about Saint Margaret Mary, right? And the Sacred Heart of Jesus in your Encounter the Saints series of books. So who was Saint Margaret, and what was her early life like?
So yeah, this is a series of books that we have for children to encounter the saints, to meet the saints, and to sort of come to know who they are and to be able to imitate them as well. So I was blessed to be able to write the book on Saint Margaret Mary. I don't know how much you know about her, but she grew up in France in the 17th century. And she had actually kind of a hard childhood. Her father died when she was young. She had several brothers, but she had went through an illness when she was a child, and then her mother went through a very serious illness when Margaret Mary was a child. So a lot of things that didn't make her childhood necessarily easy. Because her father died, they lived with relatives. And, sometimes you read accounts of her life and it's a little bit like sort of like a Cinderella story, like the in-laws didn't like Margaret Mary and her mother very much. And there was a lot of suffering there in the family. But despite that, Margaret Mary grew up very close to her family and very close to God. So I think she was raised kind of from a young age with this desire to know God and to be close to him. And she really looked forward to receiving the sacraments, the sacrament of the Eucharist and the sacrament of confirmation. And in participating in the life of the parish. So there's lots of stories from when she was growing up of she and her mother visiting the parish priest and hosting priests even at their home that were giving missions at the parish. So I would say in general she grew up very close to her family, very close to her mother, and then just this special desire to kind of find out God's will for her life.
Well, it was said that she was very particular, even at a very young age, as a child, as little as 9, to spend a lot of hours with the Blessed Sacrament, right?
Yeah, she prayed a lot, and I think when sometimes in the church, and then when she couldn't be in the church, she loved to pray in nature. So to be outside, after she finished her chores, whatever she was supposed to do, to be outside and just to kind of take in the presence of God. So she definitely received that special grace of just desiring to be close to God and finding him, in all places.
So with saints, usually there's like a turning point in their life. There's something that just sparks, their mission and spurs them on. So what is the turning point in Saint Margaret Mary's life?
Yeah, I think there's actually two for Margaret Mary. It's really interesting because she's not one of those saints that, lived a wild childhood and then had this big conversion, like our patron St. Paul that we remember this month also. Not like that. She was always had this desire to be close to God. But I think there were a couple of turning points for her that just led her even deeper. So it kind of goes to show you that no matter how close you are to God, God can always take you deeper. So the first turning point for her was when she entered the convent. She entered the Order of the Visitation, and that was it was a big moment for her. I think it showed her just how much God was directing her life, leading her to the right order of sisters to enter. But also, her family kind of opposed it a little bit. She had to sort of convince them that this really was God's will for her life. Her mother was afraid that she would never see Margaret again, and really broken up about that. And her brothers kind of felt like, because the Order of the Visitation was relatively new at that point, now it's like 400 years old. But at that point, it was only, 50 or 60 years old. And they thought, well, we don't know anything about this new order. Why don't you enter something that's already established and we know, how your life will go. So she had to overcome a little bit of that. And I think that was a big turning point for her, just realizing how God was directing her life and would help her, to overcome those challenges. And then I think the other big turning point, obviously, would be when, as a sister, and I don't think she had it necessarily easy in the convent. She had some opposition to overcome there as well, but was very happy, happy to have found her vocation, happy to be so close to God and to be living a spiritual life so close to Him. But as a sister, when she had the vision of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, I think that was the other major thing for her. That kind of helped her discover, her vocation within a vocation, if you will, her calling within her calling. That not only was she called to the religious life, called to be a visitation nun, but Jesus wanted to use her to reveal the love of His Sacred Heart to the world. And that, that was a whole journey for her. But yeah, it's kind of those two moments I think were very, very pivotal for her life and teach us a lot as well.
So how did this devotion of the Sacred Heart of Jesus come about? Because it was only recognized nearly 75 years after her death, and most people within the church itself weren't very pleased with all of this initially. In fact, her own superior was very much against this. So how did this devotion of the Sacred Heart start, and what is the devotion of the Sacred Heart of Jesus?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. If there were a sister in my community who started to, was saying that she was having visions of some aspect of Jesus, it would take a little convincing. I think naturally we don't automatically believe that, right? But so she did encounter some opposition from her superiors and from the other sisters in her community. But basically, the devotion to the Sacred Heart came to its full revelation in these visions of Jesus to Margaret Mary. But it's also very rooted in the whole life of Jesus and in the biblical tradition, because we have the line from the Gospels, after Jesus died on the cross, His heart was pierced by the soldier's lance. So we have right from the very beginning the heart of Jesus just pouring out His love for us. But it wasn't so articulated or expressed, right? Even though in the early church, and definitely in the time of Margaret Mary, the 5 wounds of Christ were very venerated, and always on Good Friday we venerate the cross and remember the great love of Jesus who sacrificed Himself for us on the cross, and the wounds which are a symbol of His love for us. But Jesus wanted to reveal in a really special way the love of His Sacred Heart to Margaret Mary, and He gave her this commission to then communicate it to her confessor and her community, and from there out to the whole world, right? So I'm sure that was overwhelming for Margaret Mary at times, but she did take it to her confessor, who was also a canonized saint, Claude de la Colombier, and he was very instrumental in writing it down and in communicating it to the proper church authorities and all of that. But yeah, basically the devotion to the Sacred Heart is recognizing that Jesus, because He became a true man, has a human heart, and with that heart He loves with a divine love. So we have we have a God with a human heart who loves us infinitely. So that's kind of the mystery of the Sacred Heart, and that's what we're venerating and worshiping when we pray to the Sacred Heart. But Jesus, in his visions, in the appearances to Margaret Mary, just revealed aspects of his Sacred Heart over and over to her. So she saw him, with the image of his Sacred Heart. In one vision, Jesus invited her to put her head on his Sacred Heart, so to kind of feel the beating of his Sacred Heart. And then also revealed the devotion of the 9 First Fridays, which is something that's still practiced today, where going to Mass and communion and confession on 9 First Fridays in a row, and promises special graces through the Sacred Heart to those who carry that out. I don't know if there's anything more you'd like me to there's so much to say about the devotion to the Sacred Heart and Margaret Mary's role in it. But that's kind of the basic.
So I think they also included doing a holy hour, which I think became very popular during her time as well. Doing a holy hour to dwell on the agony of Jesus in the garden. And
yes.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think there are some other things, but the main thing is the First Friday devotion, right?
Yes, yeah, and you're right about the holy hour, and she would often ask her superior for permission to make that holy hour on Thursday nights, kind of like Jesus made it on Holy Thursday.
Okay.
Margaret Mary would ask permission to make that holy hour to keep Jesus company in the garden on Thursday nights. And it's interesting because sometimes the superiors would give permission and sometimes not. And Margaret Mary struggled with that because Jesus was asking this of her, but then her superiors were giving her permission. And Jesus at one point told her that her obedience to her superiors was the greatest sacrifice that she could make and the greatest expression of her love for Jesus that she could make. So I think that's really, really important and really encouraging in the sense of we might feel like we should be doing something or doing something more in our spiritual life, but as long as we're being really faithful to what Jesus is calling us in our state of life and in the even sometimes mundane, duties of the day, that's kind of the greatest sacrifice, the greatest expression of love we can offer to Jesus, like Margaret Mary.
Yeah. In a way, it's similar to what Mother Teresa says, right? God is not calling us to be successful, but to be faithful.
Yeah, exactly. And you see that definitely in Margaret Mary's life, because when I was writing the book, like so many times I had to figure out how to express she felt like a failure so many times, and we're reading it, 400 years later and thinking, wow, this woman was so faithful and so holy and so devoted to our Lord. But she didn't feel that all the time. She felt like, gosh, I can't do what Jesus is asking me. I'm a failure at being a nun. She had all those thoughts kind of running through her head, and that too was really encouraging, just the humanity of the saints and of Saint Margaret Mary. But totally like Mother Teresa, not asking for success, even in the case of Margaret Mary, but really for that faithfulness to whatever the day is giving. Whether it's you have permission to make this holy hour, or no, today you don't, and just being obedient and faithful to that.
And there's a line I think I was reading about her on Wikipedia, and they said her colleagues and everybody else said she was not very skillful at any of the tasks that she was assigned.
Yeah.
So,
they put her in formation for a while. She was with the novices. I think she was pretty okay at that. But then she was in the infirmary for a while and supposed to be helping, with the sisters who weren't well, and she didn't do very well at that, and she couldn't really cook. And yeah.
And it's funny because 400 years later, she's a canonized saint, and these things are still remembered.
It was because of her faithfulness and her. I guess she really teaches us to trust in our experience of God, because she could have kind of blown that off, that prayer experience where she actually saw Jesus, and he asked her, to take this to your confessor, and this devotion is, I want people to know how much I love them. But because she was faithful to that, we can know, more about God's love than we did before. So that's kind of true for each of us too, maybe not in the same way of introducing a whole devotion to the church, but absolutely there's something that God has to say to the world through our lives that he can only say through our lives.
And another thing is, I think if he truly understood the love that Jesus has for us, I think it would change the way we look at the world itself, right?
Yeah. And Jesus kind of said that in so many words to Margaret Mary, saying over and over again, look at my heart, which loves people so much. And yeah, it has to change the way that you look at the world, the way that you look at yourself and the people around you, for sure.
So what can we learn? I mean, there's so much to learn about her, and it would be hard to emulate someone who is so devoted, who is so obedient, and from such an early age. But what can we, as ordinary people, do, or learn from this wonderful saint and be like her?
Yeah. I think, one of the main things that I took away really was to believe in my own experience of God. So Margaret Mary had this experience of God where she was drawn to him from an early age, and she followed him to her vocation, to enter the convent, and then to the point of Jesus wanting to reveal his Sacred Heart to her, and she believed in that, and she followed that, and she clung on to that with all her strength, even when it got really, really difficult. And obviously, my path is not going to be exactly the same, but I think each of us has experiences of God in prayer, and sometimes it can be easy to discount them and to say, well, okay, that was a nice thought, or I don't know. Sometimes we don't always quite believe what God is telling us in prayer, or believe what He's revealing about His love for us. And I think Margaret Mary taught me to really believe and to cling to what God reveals to me in prayer, and to let that direct my life in a certain sense. And then, other things, just like we talked about, just being faithful to her daily duties. We can do that too. We can learn that from her. And I think also, we talked a little bit about her not being like really skilled at a lot of things, or sometimes feeling just constantly like a failure. But it's what she did in that I think we can emulate. And she always went to Jesus. She, when she felt like a failure, when she felt like she couldn't do something, when she didn't know what to do, she always went to Jesus, and then always sought the advice of her confessor, and always submitted things to her superior too. So, we can do that too, in that everybody has those ups and downs of life, and those moments when we feel like, oh, I really messed that up, or just feel like I don't know what to do in this particular situation, or just moments of feeling overwhelmed. It's a busy time with the end of the school year and the beginning of summer, and it's easy to feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do.
Yeah.
But I think bringing all those feelings of confusion or feeling overwhelmed, bringing that to Jesus, just like Margaret Mary did, and maybe we don't feel anything too special from him, but just knowing that we can, like Margaret Mary, kind of put our head on his heart and hear his heartbeat and remember that he loves us, and that's the most important thing in our lives.
And like you mentioned, no matter where you are spiritually, God is always drawing you deeper, right? Deeper and deeper.
Yeah, exactly. And for Margaret Mary, even starting off very close to God, we can see, looking at her life, like, oh my gosh, God did so much. And I think if we're honest and we look at our lives, we can see God doing that with us too. If you look back at your life 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago, God has done things in our lives, right? And we can sort of do him the favor or pay him the compliment of really believing what he's done in our lives.
And I think during this time, especially with all this social media, with all these things clamoring for our attention, we're slowly losing belief, if not becoming lukewarm to the devotion of the Sacred Heart and to Jesus himself.
Yeah, it can happen. There's so many things to divide our attention these days, for sure. But I think, even with all of that, maybe the devotion to the Sacred Heart is what we need right now. Kind of that one thing that sort of focuses us, and it's an image too, right? It's the image of the heart with the flame of love, and that's something that we can just kind of like fix our gaze on. And when we are feeling divided, or things are calling out for our attention here, there, and everywhere, we can sort of close our eyes and just picture that heart that's beating, that's loving us, and then when we open our eyes again, we're able to see that heart in all those things that are clamoring for our attention. So it might be kind of exactly what we need.
In India, we actually have, like, in every home, it was asked of every home to have the image of the Sacred Heart and Immaculate Heart of Mary on the altar, every altar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of dedicate the home to the
Yes.
Sacred Heart too,
Yeah.
right? I think enthronement of the Sacred Heart.
Yeah. Do you have any last words on Saint Margaret Mary and the Sacred Heart of Jesus?
Yeah, I guess it's just impressive, you know, to think about a woman 400 years ago who was a cloistered nun, and you know, 400 years later, we get to reap the benefits of her faithfulness to Jesus. So I think that's just inspiring in a sense. You know, people 400 years from now might not remember my name or your name, but certainly there will be people who have been affected by our lives if we can put into practice that faithfulness to Jesus and that real strong belief in his love. Yeah, I think also it's just really beautiful that God raises up saints at the times when they're really needed, right? So if you look at history at the time of Margaret Mary, there was kind of like a harsh tendency, right? So spiritually speaking, like people were being instructed to like perform these penances and, you know, kind of a harsh view of like how God would judge you at the end of your life. And instead God reveals to Margaret Mary that his heart is just longing for his people and really longing to love his people. And not denying the judgment. Like we need grace, we need to avoid sin, and we need to remember that we will be judged at the end of our life, but we'll be judged by a God who became man and took on a human heart for us. So I think that too it's really hopeful for our times when we look around and see, you know, so much confusion and a lot of different crises. We can trust that God is going to raise up the saints, the holy men and women that we need for our time as well.
So thank you so much, Sister Emily, for talking to us about St. Margaret Mary and the Sacred Heart devotion. And thank you for also writing the book, because if it wasn't for the book, you know, it's so hard to find books on her, and it's so hard to find people who are alive who have written these books about her.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for agreeing to come on this podcast. Thank you to your superiors as well. And tell people where they can find you and where they can find your books online.
Sure, yeah. And thank you. This was a real delight to speak to you about a project that I loved doing. People can find me on social media at Sister Emily Beata. They can also find out what our sisters are doing on social media at Daughters St. Paul. And our website is daughtersofstpaul.com, and the book is on online.org.
All right. Thank you so much once again, and we wish you all the best for your ministry.
Thank you so much. God bless you.